We live in a beautiful place. But what if all of a sudden it was just to disappear? For some of us, this is almost exactly like what has happened to us. COVID-19 has robbed us of the chance of a sneaky trip to the Ramore or a barbecue at your mate's house. For some of you, it's taken your opportunity to finish school at the end of the year, and perhaps your final year. It's taken your opportunity to complete exams. It's taken away your visits to family members. You might even be able to find yourself unable to leave the house. In short, we've all suffered at the hands of this pandemic. Over the last few weeks, we've been thinking about how Jesus responds to various situations. We've looked at isolation, our requests, the future, and today we're going to look at loss through the story of the healing of blind Bartimaeus, a man who was dealing with the loss of his sight. We come across Bartimaeus outside the city of Jericho, sitting by the roadside, and we're told that he was a blind beggar. At this time of the event, people with disabilities were looked down upon in society. Some viewed it as a sign that you were a product of sin, that your parents had sinned or you had sinned, you'd done something wrong and God was angry, while others viewed you as just not really having any kind of importance to society and therefore not bothering you. Regardless, Bartimaeus is an outcast. He's quite literally been cast out of the city. He's lost his sight, and as a result, he's lost his dignity and his security. And so when Jesus draws near, the most expected thing for Bartimaeus to do is stick his head down in the hope that some people in the crowd following them would just throw him a few coins or some food. And yet what actually happens is that Bartimaeus starts to shout like a madman. We read in Mark chapter 10, verses 47 and 48, that when he, Bartimaeus, heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet. But he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." I have a couple of questions here that I'd love to know the answer to. The first is, what is making Bartimaeus call out to Jesus? Is it desperation? He's at his lowest point and he's desperate for something to impact on his life and make it better. Is it hope that this teacher who was supposedly able to do these miraculous things might actually be able to do something for him? Or is it faith that God has sent his promised Messiah, who in the words of the prophet Isaiah will wipe away all tears. He will remove forever all insults and mockery against his land and people. What makes us call out to God at times of loss? Is it desperation? Is it hope? Or faith? Or maybe a combination of all three? The second question that I have is, why does Bartimaeus use the words "Son of David" when referring to Jesus? This title given to Jesus might appear a bit strange to us, but at the time it was actually a loaded political statement. Palestine was under Roman occupation and Caesar was the supreme leader. Any challenges to his authority were suppressed by whatever means necessary. By relating Jesus back to David, Bartimaeus is claiming that Jesus is king and ruler of all, as David was the greatest king of Israel, and actually not Caesar. It's an audible hand grenade. And the crowd hearing this might have agreed with this sentiment privately, but in public, it's probably going to attract the attention of Roman soldiers and bring down trouble on them all. Maybe that's why they say to be quiet. But against all expectations of the crowd, Jesus responds to Bartimaeus and he calls him to him. And with this blind beggar standing before him at a loss of what to do, where to go, Jesus responds to him with the simple question, "What do you want me to do for you?" It's such a loaded question in some ways, and in others, it's really simple. Bartimaeus' response of "Rabbi, I want to see" in verse 51 is so obvious when we hear it. It's natural that he wants to see. But what will sight bring to Bartimaeus? The answer to that takes us a little deeper. See, sight for Bartimaeus will allow him to go back into the town, to gain a skill, to gain a job, a chance of income, a chance of stability and security. But through all this, it's a chance for restoration. Restoration of dignity, restoration to community. And yet when he's healed, his priorities now lie with Jesus. Such is the transformation in Bartimaeus' life that he leaves everything behind that he thought he wanted to follow Jesus. If we were Bart, is this how we would have wanted Jesus to respond to us? Even right now, what do we want Jesus to do for us? Maybe we want Jesus to give us comfort. or security. Maybe we want Jesus to make things easier for us. We ask him to take away this virus so that we can be with our mates again. We ask that he helps us through our exams so we can go on to have the career that we want. We ask him to bring healing for those that we love because we're afraid of what might happen if it doesn't. The next question we need to ask ourselves, though, is how will we be transformed by Jesus' response to us? I love how Jesus responds to Bartimaeus in this story. He simply hears Bartimaeus cry out to him and he asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" But it's not just a simple response. Because if we look at the wider context of what's going on in Mark's gospel, we see it's actually a foreshadowing of what's to come. We see that Jesus is about to go to Jerusalem, and following his Father's will, he would go to the cross and he would die for us to restore us, to restore our loss of relationship with God. This is the ultimate act of restoration. The Bible tells us that Jesus was the King of Kings with the power of heaven at his command. Yet his response to Bartimaeus is much more like that of a servant. With humility and with respect, he asks how he can serve Bartimaeus. And this loss that Bartimaeus had kept him from living as he might have wanted to. The restoration of his sight might have been a dream he had for years. He might have planned in his head what he would do if he received his sight again. And yet when he encounters Jesus, his life looks so very different. I wonder what it is you'll do first when lockdown ends. I think I might travel and see my folks, or maybe play a round of golf, or maybe head for a McFlurry. We'll be able to do all these things that we've lost out on. But will we be transformed into becoming more like Jesus? Will we look upon the people around us with increased love because of our sense of community being back together? Will we continue to show appreciation for those on frontline services who've sacrificed so much for us to keep us safe? Will gratitude be our attitude? Or will we fall back into the normality of how things were before COVID-19? You see, Jesus' response to Bartimaeus shows us how to live for God and how to live for each other. And he invites us into this transformational life of wholeness, where sin and shame and death are lost and peace and love triumph. Jesus responded to Bartimaeus by asking, "What do you want me to do for you?" I wonder if he looks at us and asks the question, "What do you think about what I did for you on that cross?" What our response to this question might be.